Hello everyone. So today we'll be talking about how to actually take the math test on the SAT. Uh, I'll talk about the non-calculator section today. So with the non-calculator section, we have about 20 questions. In 20 questions, you have 25 minutes, which means you don't have much time to really go through each question in detail, right? You have to really go with the assumption that you're doing 1 minute per question. The way I would space it out, the first 10 questions, try to target it to be done in 10 minutes. The next 5 questions, you can take about 8 minutes. And then the remaining 5 questions, you take another 6 to 7 minutes. The section is divided into multiple choice, and then there are open-ended questions as well. So we'll talk through how to browse through them quickly. Very important thing in SAT, do not get stuck on a question. If you get stuck on a question, it's going to take a lot of time, which means you'll lose that time to solve other questions, and you may even end up not finishing up this section completely in the allotted time. So in the beginning of the section, we have some reference formulas. I would recommend that you memorize these instead of having to go back and look at them. Again, it's all about saving as much time as you can. Every second counts during the test. Um, so we've talked about linear equations and inequalities in our previous lecture, so I'm going to focus on questions that are just related to linear equations and inequalities. So let me go ahead and get started here. So if you look at the first question, it's very much related to solving linear equations. In normal circumstances, I would say this is how you would solve it. So the first thing I do, I write the question down, and this is how most students do it. They like to rewrite the question. A big no-no. Don't rewrite your questions. You have the question right in front of you. Spend that time, instead of rewriting, just doing something better than that, right? So right now, here I'll multiply the 3 on both sides. So my next step would be x minus 1 equals 3k. I know the value of k is 3, so x minus 1 is 9, and that means x is 10. This is the normal approach to solve the problem. As you see, we have written down 4 things here, and now I'll change the color up a little bit, and let me just write it a little better here. So this is how I would recommend when you're doing these questions in the SAT. Try to minimize the amount of writing that you have to do. If you have options, go with the options. So the first thing I would do here, multiply the 3 out, and also substitute k equals 3 up front in the question. That means I already know x minus 1 is 9, and then I'm only left with 10 as my option. It should be a one-step problem, not a four-step problem. Very little things, but it's important during the SAT because it saves you a lot of time when you add it up across all the questions. Next one, we'll look at number 3 now. So in number 3, the question says, and let me just zoom in a little bit so that you can see it better. Question goes that on Saturday afternoon, Amanda sent M text messages each hour for 5 hours. Tyron sent P text messages each hour for 4 hours. Now, I'm reading the full question here. During the SAT, a recommendation would be that instead of reading the full questions, and sometimes the questions might be long, just focus on the main parts. So here, M text messages, 5 hours. P text messages, 4 hours. And the final question, total number of messages. So just by reading this much of information, instead of reading the full question, if I just find out the important pieces of information from the question, I can pretty much get to my answer. They're asking me to find the total number of messages. If I'm sending M texts each hour for 5 hours, I'm sending 5M. If I'm sending P messages for 4 hours, I'm doing 4P. So the sum, the total number of messages, is going to be this. And I get my answer as C. Again, don't need to read the whole question. Try to take out the important pieces from the question and piece them together to get to your answer. Let's move to the next one. We talked about linear equations. So this next question focuses completely on linear equations. Again, so now let's try to do it the way I told you before. We don't need to read the whole question. The important thing I see here is P equals 108 minus 23D. P is the number of phones left. D is the number of days. And what's the value of 108 in this equation? So basically, from the amount of items that I have underlined so far, I know that P is some number of phones left, which means she starts off with something, and then every day 23 is getting decreased from that number. The equation tells me that I'm starting at 108, and every day, right here, there is a decrease of 23. obviously we're talking about phones because P is the number of phones left. So if you think about it, you're starting off at 108. Katie is starting off at 108, and every day she's pretty much repairing 23 phones, which means she will be left with some amount of phones after D days, right? So that 108 number, when you started off at 108, she's starting it off each week with 108 phones to fix. How did I get there? Again, if you look at the other options, I'm going to check option C, 108 per hour. Per hour means it's talking about a rate. And we talked about this in our previous lecture that rate is related directly to the slope, which in this case is negative 23. So this is definitely not my answer. If I look at part D, again, there is the word a rate of 108 per day. So that's the slope. We're not talking about the slope right now. The slope is negative 23, which is why I would cross this option out as well. And Katie will complete the repairs within 108 days. It doesn't make sense, right? Because your P stands for phones. So the whole equation, the unit should be with phones. It should not be with days, which means I'll cross out A. So that's another way of solving problems, and this is a very important way of using elimination. Try to eliminate the options that really don't make sense, and at times this will be useful when you're maybe not getting the answer completely, but you're getting close to it. You know that you have the answer in the grasp, but it's just not one of the options. Try to eliminate the options that really don't make sense. All right, so we'll just move on to another question. And again, I'm doing this from the actual SAT website, like the College Board website. So we are solving questions that are very likely to be seen during an SAT test. Again, number 6, related to linear equations. Now, without reading the question, I'm just looking at this equation. And then reading the last part of the question, what is the estimated increase each year? They're talking about rate, and increase every year means what's the increase per year, which is rate. And again, we said that rate is directly related to slope, which is 3 in this case. When we compare to y equals mx plus b, m is 3, and that's the slope. So the estimated increase in height is 3 up front. All right, that's how quick we need to be during these tests. Again, it's very easy to get distracted on one question and lose all the time that you need for the other questions. So it's very important that we keep going and we keep up with the pace. Similarly, number 8, now this one's pretty simple here. You have a over b is 2. There are several ways to do this problem. What I like to do is look at the question. It's asking for b over a. So we already know b over a is 1/2. It's just the reciprocal of this. And we're going to do 4 times 1/2 because it's 4 times b over a. And my answer is 2. All right, let's move to the next one. Next one is about solving the equations. Now, we've learned about how to actually solve these equations, right? We have used elimination before, we've used substitution before. You can go ahead with that. So I'm going to start with, I mentioned in my previous lecture, I like elimination better than substitution. So I'm going to go ahead with the elimination. The only thing that I'll do is I'll rewrite the first part of this question as it is, but the second part, I'll just multiply it by 3 and rewrite it. So what I'm doing is I'll do minus 3x plus 6y. Notice how I wrote x below the x and y below the y. I multiplied it all by 3 equals negative 57. When I add these two, 3x's cancel. 4y plus 6y is 10y. Minus 23 minus 57 is minus 80. And that gives me y as negative 8. I don't need to solve for x. Stop here. You already have your answer. So again, you can absolutely go and substitute y back, get the value for x, and you'll get the 3. But you don't need to do it. You have to make sure that when you get your answer, you should know when to stop. All right. One last question here in terms of number 12, which is also related to line. We said y equals mx plus b. And you see how important linear equations are in an SAT. A lot of the questions are based on this this particular formula. So we know the slope is 1/7. It passes through the origin, which means the y-coordinate. If you think about it, if it's passing through the origin, I'd given this example in my last lecture as well. If it's passing through the origin, the y-coordinate is 0, which means the y-intercept is 0. So this is y equals 1/7 x plus 0, or y equals 1/7 x. Now, which of the points here match this equation is what we have to find. I'm looking at the x values. If x is 0, my value for y is 0, so this does not work. If x is 1, my value for y is 1/7, so this does not work. If x is 7, my value for y with 7 times 1/7 is 1, so this does not work. When x is 14, 14 times 1/7 is 2, which means D is my answer. Okay. Finally, I did want to just cover one question for inequalities. And that's what we'll be doing next. Actually, there are a couple questions. I'm going to go back to just make sure we cover one of the inequality questions that I had. Right there. So, which of the following is not a solution? Inequalities, solve it exactly as you would with equalities. If 3x minus 5 is greater than or equal to 4x minus 3, again, don't rewrite the question. The only thing I'm doing is subtract 4x on both sides. So I'm left with minus x minus 5 is greater than or equal to negative 3. Add 5 on both sides. If you're confident enough, do minus 4x and plus 5 all in one step. It's still going to give you the same answer, and it's actually going to save you some writing. So if you're confident, do everything in one step and it'll still work out. So I'm left with negative x is greater than or equal to 2, which means x, remember, now I'm dividing by negative 1, so the sign flips, is less than or equal to negative 2. If x is less than or equal to negative 2, it can be negative 2, it can be negative 3, it can be negative 4, it can be negative 5, because it's less than or equal to negative 2. And when it's less than negative 2, it means you're going left on the number line where you get negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. The question's asking, again, a key word here is not a solution. So in this case, since negative 2, negative 3, negative 5 are all solutions, negative 1 is my answer, which is not a solution. Read the question carefully. It's not important to read full questions, but it's important to capture the pieces that you really need to find your answer and to find the keywords. And that's what you need to practice more about. So one last question with inequalities, and then we'll end our lesson today. I will be covering new topics in my next lecture, and then we'll again follow this format where we cover a topic, we see how the questions fare in the SAT and what are the best ways to solve them. All right, one last inequality question. Y is less than negative x plus a, y is greater than x plus b. Now, in this case, it's important that you make sure that your signs stay the same. So I rewrite the first line here, but the second line, I'll change it a little bit by multiplying by negative 1. Negative x minus b. When I add these two, I get 0 is less than negative 2x plus a minus b, which now also tells me that 2x is less than a minus b. The one piece of information that they give me in the question is 0, 0. So if I substitute x as 0, I get 0 is less than a minus b. I add b on both sides, I get b is less than a, or a is greater than b. Now I did this in multiple steps, and this is one thing I wanted to show you. If you're doing this in, let's say, your school test, this is how you would solve it. You'll get a is greater than b. But in the SAT, again, it's important to capture the pieces of information you need. So in this case, 0, 0. If I would have seen that earlier, then this would have already told me that 0 is less than a, substituting 0, 0 in my first equation. And then if I put it in my second equation, 0 is greater than b. So b is a negative number since 0 is bigger than it, and a is a positive number. So a positive number is always going to be bigger than a negative number, which means a is greater than b. And I get my answer right away. So there will be questions, there will be hundreds of ways to solve those questions, but you have to make sure that you pick the right method to solve your problems. So that'll be it for today. Again, if you like the videos, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, so that I can continue posting such content. Thank you, everyone.